गुड इव्हनिंग ऑल. आजच्या आपल्या दर महिन्याच्या क्लिनिकल मीटिंग मध्ये आपणा सर्वांचं स्वागत आहे. आजच्या मीटिंगचं वैशिष्ट्य म्हणजे आपले IMA महाराष्ट्राचे ट्रेझरर डॉक्टर राजीव अग्रवाल हे देखील पहिल्यांदाच आपल्या IMA सांगलीच्या क्लिनिकल मीटिंग मध्ये पॅनलिस्ट म्हणून जॉईन झालेले आहेत. मागच्याच आठवड्यात वानखेडे सर आणि राजीव अग्रवाल सर सांगली मिरजेच्या दौऱ्यावर आले होते. तर त्यावेळी आपण त्यांना रिक्वेस्ट केली होती की कोणीतरी एक IMA महाराष्ट्रातर्फे आपल्याकडं दर 15 दिवसातनं किंवा महिन्यातनं एखादं लेक्चर घ्यायला येईल का. तर त्यांनी लगेच होकार कळवला आणि त्याच्याप्रमाणे ते आलेले आहेत. त्यासोबतच आजचे दुसरे 2 क्लिनिकल टॉपिक्स जे आहेत ते डॉक्टर नेमाणी आणि उदगावकर घेणार आहेत. मी आपल्या अध्यक्षा डॉक्टर पटवर्धन मॅडमना विनंती करतो की त्यांनी प्रास्ताविक आणि स्वागत करावं आणि त्याच्यानंतर मीटिंगला सुरुवात होईल.
Hello.
नीचे ऊपर ठीक है ऊपर
Good evening. Am I audible? Hello.
Hi, madam. Audible.
Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to each one of you. I hope more members will join subsequently. I would first like to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Rajiv Agarwal, who has kindly consented to talk about IMA today. And I would also like to welcome our speakers today, Dr. Abhijit Udgavkar and Dr. Nemani. I also welcome each one of you for joining today. I would like to take this opportunity to tell our IMA members what activities we have our executive committee has done since April 2021. So considering the academic activities, the following activities have been done. First is on 16th of April, we had CME on COVID. It was a hot topic that time because COVID was at its peak that time. And the topic was let's face the challenge. And we had a very good CME. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, madam.
Okay. So we had a very good discussion and the speakers spoke. There were excellent and informative talks given by all of our members. And we had one guest speaker, Dr. Deepak Golwalkar, who shared his experience about methylene blue. So it was a very good CME. And almost 700 people joined that time, and then almost 600 more saw it afterwards. So it was a very successful and informative CME. After that, on 21st of May, we had a CME on osteoporosis. That was also a very informative CME. Then on 16th July, we had 4 case presentations, which were also very good. And on 29th August, we had a 2 credit point CME with very good speakers, selected speakers who gave a variety of talks and which was highly appreciated. Almost 700 people had joined and more than 550 people registered for that CME. This CME, then after that, on 18th of September, we had our first offline CME, and it was a CME which was conducted by a corporation, Sangli Miras Corporation, and it was regarding National Tuberculosis Elimination Program in order to sensitize IMA members regarding this program. And it was an excellent CME. However, unfortunately, the number of doctors were very less in number. Now, in this, what were the highlights was that what they were emphasizing is that almost 4.5 lakh people die of tuberculosis every year, and which is a very high number. And another bad part is that one tuberculosis patient, he infects 10 to 12 more people. So it is a very infectious disease, and the government of India, that is our Prime Minister, has given the slogan that till 2025 this tuberculosis should be eliminated from our country. And so this National Tuberculosis Elimination Program is trying to do its best, and both financially, both physically, and they are very well organized. Now, what they want from our IMA members is that they want us, all members, to notify whenever they see a tuberculosis patient, maybe the doctor may be of any specialty, even the pharmacist or the pathologist, microbiologist, anyone, wherever the patient comes, they expect us to notify to the authorities. And it is very simple. We have a number of their coordinator. We can just ring them and they will do the needful. So first thing they want us to do is notify. And this they have been trying since a long time. This is because apart from notifying that they will collect the information, and for every patient, the government gives 500 rupees per month for their nutrition, and it is paid into their account directly. Then the doctor also and the person notifying also receives incentive. So apart from that, it is very beneficial for the patient, because the patient will get all the tablets, all the treatment at their doorstep, free of charge. All the investigations are also done free of charge. So that is why. And the most important thing is that because the notification is less by the doctors, they are the next step. We hope they will not go to the next step. And the next step is that they can take legal action against the doctors if they do not notify the tuberculosis patient, and they can find out from the many sources. So we hope that all our IMA members notify whenever they see a tuberculosis patient, and so it will help not only the authorities to control the tuberculosis and eliminate it till 2025. Now the 6 CMA is today. Now, coming to the social activities, we have started a webinar for public, that is, it is called Dr. Tumcha Bhetila. And it was and we have a webinar every month. The first two webinars were Netra Tadnyanche Margadarshan. It was in 2 parts. Then we had pediatricians speaking, and then we had gynecologists speaking. तर बालरोग तज्ञांचे मार्गदर्शन, स्त्रीरोग तज्ञांचे मार्गदर्शन असे 4 कार्यक्रम आपण केलेले आहेत. And it was a huge success because many people have joined. Another thing we have done is we have started a IMA YouTube channel, Arogya Jagruti म्हणून. तर we upload all our these webinars on that, and so people can again see them at their leisure. So it is become very popular. Now the next will be on 14th of November because it is a World Diabetes Day. We have a very good webinar on diabetes that day. So this will continue, this activity will continue. Then on 10th of October 2025, we had a live, that is a offline workshop for gym instructors. This was in view of the fact that we are hearing sudden deaths in young patients while in the gymnasium. And so to make the gym instructors, to sensitize them about what precautions they should take. Then about that, we had 2 speakers. We had was a CPR demonstration by anesthetists, and in case of emergency, what to do. And the other was a lecture by a cardiologist, and to tell them what are the do's and the don'ts about in the gym, about what they should follow, what precautions they should take, how much, what the myths regarding the protein supplements and the diet fats, and how much exercise they should do. So these were the activities we have performed. Then we have also, we are part of Plastic Mukti Abhiyan, and it was launched in August, on 15th of August, and many of our members are participating in this activity. Then we held 2 blood donation camps. One we had 28 donors, and the next time we had 65 donors. Then now, the recent is on 14th of November, we have World Diabetes Day. And so we are having a diabetic awareness week. And during this week, we are going to do free checkups for hospital staff, because the hospital staff works for us, but many a times their health is ignored. So we are going to check all the patients who are diabetic and hypertensive or having ischemic heart disease, and those who are over 50. So this will be our next activity. So once again, I thank you all for joining. I thank Dr. Agarwal for joining and the speakers today. So with this, I hand over to Dr. Suhas for further proceedings.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam, for this half year's overview. Let me introduce Dr. Rajiv Agarwal. The slide itself shows he's a pediatrician, practicing pediatrician and medical legal expert practicing in Mira Bhayandar area. He is honorary treasurer of IMA Maharashtra State, member of IMA Standing Committee, co-convener of IMA Headquarter Financial Manual, CWC member of IMA Maharashtra State, vice president of AMC Mumbai, and past president of IMA Mira Bhayandar. So he is going to guide us about why to become IMA member and what are the roles and responsibilities as an IMA member of all of us. Over to you, Rajiv sir.
Thank you, sir. I thank IMA Sangli for giving me this opportunity to express my views on why to become an IMA member. And I appreciate the hospitality shared by IMA Mirajan Sangli when we came on 16th of this month. And it was really a one-to-one good discussion. And it was nice to interact with you all. Without wasting much time, let's go on to the agenda. Why am I taking this topic of why to become an IMA member? Because IMA headquarters and IMA Maharashtra has come up with a unique scheme. This has come after almost 2 years, where 25% discount is given to the membership fee of IMA Maharashtra and IMA headquarters. So those who become members now, they will be getting the life membership fee at 25% discount. We had appealed that day also to IMA Sangli that they should also reduce their share so that we can make more members. And from 1st of April 2022, this membership fee will increase by 15% by default as per the bylaws of IMA headquarters. So after 30th of November, this membership fee will become normal again, what was prevailing earlier. And from 1st of April, it will increase. Now, let me tell you what are the benefits of becoming an IMA member. The membership privileges. As per MCI ethics regulation, you need to be a member of a medical association. Membership in medical society for the advancement of his profession. A physician should affiliate with associations and societies of allopathic medical profession and involve actively in the functioning of such bodies. IMA is the best association to join. You represent the largest medical NGO of the world with over 3.5 lakh members spread across 170 local and 34 states. Maharashtra itself has 218 branches and we have 45,000 members. And believe me, our president has promised the national president that in this membership drive, we will increase the membership of IMA Maharashtra by at least 3,000. In fact, I being a member of IMA Mira Bhayandar, we have taken a pledge of increasing a membership of 100 by 100 at least. We are just a membership of 325. And IMA Sangli, IMA Mira, they are a big body and they can really increase the membership by more than 200, if they decide. So this is one important thing. IMA membership is transferable all across the country. That means tomorrow, if I am shifting from Mira Bhayandar to Sangli, this membership can be transferred to Sangli. I don't have to pay anything extra for Maharashtra and headquarters. Suppose IMA Mira Bhayandar charges the membership fee, their local branch membership fee of 2,000 rupees and Sangli charges 3,000 rupees. So I have to just pay 1,000 rupees to phone attend IMA Sangli 1,000 rupees and 2,000 will be paid by IMA Mira Bhayandar to Sangli so that the IMA Sangli membership is paid and I become member of IMA Sangli. My membership with IMA Mira Bhayandar will stop. if your posting is transferable, those who are doing government jobs and all, you can directly become a member of headquarters or a state and headquarters. You can also become associate member of another branch. Suppose I am practicing in Sangli, but I want to become a member of Miraj also because of my super specialty or specialty. So I can always become an associate member. I do not have a voting right in that case. Using IMA members ID, you can avail many facilities and privileges in many various states, which will come across surely. You get the e-Jima monthly. Earlier it used to come a physical copy. Now because of this COVID time, it has become e-Jima. So, and it's an index journal where you can publish your articles. They can participate in all national programs of IMA, and they can avail discounts in many hotels, cars, like Mercedes gives 50,000 deposits. Hyundai is there, Maruti is there. They are giving special discounts for IMA member. You have to just produce your IMA membership certificate, RO, then air filters. Now we are tying up with airlines also for giving some special discounts to IMA members. IMA also recognizes doctors at branch, state, and central level with awards, honors, orations, and recognitions. And what about the privileges of service doctors? Now, private practitioners may say, okay, these are the benefits to us. But what about doctors serving in medical colleges or, in government hospitals? IMA is fighting for the retirement. Right now, they retire at 58 or 60, I suppose. We are fighting for the retirement at 65 years. IMA is fighting for regularization of ad hoc appointments. Now, privileges to update one's skills and knowledge. As per MCI Ethics Regulation 1.2.3, you need to attend CMEs, and IMA provides a platform. IMA Sangli, madam just told the activities done by IMA Sangli. It has been phenomenal. I mean, what activities you have been doing in this COVID time, it is really appreciable with people, about 700 to 1,000 people attending. So it's really good, So this is one way of interacting with people. A physician should participate in professional meetings as part of the continuing medical education, that is CME program, for at least 30 hours every 5 years, organized by reputed professional academic bodies or by authorized organization. The compliance of the requirement shall be informed regularly to Medical Council of India or to the State Council. Now, IMA is one body where I suppose if you are just using the brand of IMA, say IMA Sangli or IMA Maharashtra, you get accreditation with MMC immediately, because we have all the 9 MMC elected members who have been nominated, who have been representing IMA. Dr. Shivkumar Uttre is our chairman of MMC, and he is very kind and courteous enough to grant credit points to all the IMA branches wherever they apply. And even if there is some problem, I would appreciate if you could call me or you could call Uttre sir directly, and you could say, sir, this is the problem, hamara apply karne mein thoda sa late ho gaya. Believe me, he will go out of the way and help you and get it granted for you. Members are entitled for branch, state, and IMA scientific communication through news bulletins, e-bulletins, journals, and other special communication. Whatever orders are passed by IMA headquarters, they are percolated to IMA Maharashtra, and IMA Maharashtra regularly sends emails and messages to the local branch and presidents. We have a local WhatsApp groups of local branch presidents also. IMA College of General Practitioners, that is called as IMA CGP chapter, which provides fellowships, Fellow of College of General Physicians and GP training program. This is a membership of IMA which is granted for general practitioners, and you have to just pay a nominal amount of 1,500 rupees and you become a life member there, and there are many benefits of that. IMA Academy of Medical Specialties, that is the IMA AMS chapter, looks after the interests of specialists and organizes specialist oriented CME programs. One can become a fellow of IMA AMS. These two chapters regularly give fellowships program. Like if you must have seen in my introduction, I did an FIAMS, that is fellowship in IMA's AMS. This. So after you are having an experience of 15 or 20 years of practice, you apply for this fellowship, you pay a nominal amount, and this fellowship is granted. So this is one more degree which we can add to our letter pad or your visiting card. IMA Akansina Institute wing of IMA provide distant learning training programs, for general practitioners, for hospital owners, for consultants, IVF courses and other things. They are really very wonderful, and you get a letter of completion from IMA. IMA comes out with regular guidelines, white papers, and stands on various issues. IMA is the first to know, warn, and send alerts and participate in all natural calamities and outbreaks. Recently, we had this flood situation in your area, Kolhapur, Satara, Sangli. Even donations also to the government. We have sent medicines. and our doctors have participated and helped overtide the crisis, and donations were collected from all branches of IMA Maharashtra. IMA runs a paramedic institute and trains technicians. Most state branches have libraries of their own. IMA develops regular guidelines on various medical issues. Community service privileges. IMA provides an opportunity to members to serve with dignity and participate in various community service programs. IMA wing has the Aao Gaon Chale, works for providing care in villages. IMA Gujarat has adopted over 40 villages. IMA Mumbai West has adopted around 2 villages. IMA Mumbai has also adopted, and many other branches of Maharashtra has also adopted few villages. IMA wing Welcome the Girl Child, works for the interest of girl child. Over 40 branches of IMA run state-of-art blood bank, namely in Dehradun, Kanpur, Varanasi, Bareilly, Allahabad, Moradabad, and believe me, there is one such in Akluj also in Maharashtra, and they are doing it fantastically. In Mehsana, IMA Gujarat runs a special program for tribal health. IMA Erode and IMA Goa runs Imayam. It is a center for terminal patients, and they are really doing well and at a very minimum cost for terminal patients or bedridden patients. IMA headquarters run Jan Aushadhi drugstore as a part of its social commitment. Sorry. IMA has an online directory of rare blood groups and of organ donation. IMA guides for making biomedical waste in various states. IMA Kerala runs one of the biggest biomedical waste for its member establishment, and this is not just for its member establishment. Even government of Kerala utilizes their service. You can also do one such in your area. And IMA headquarters is working tooth and nail with the Central Pollution Control Board for relaxation, and believe me, this relaxation of less than 50 birds for ETA, and these have come because of IMA. IMA runs a National Disaster Management Cell. Under IMA National Disaster Management Cell, IMA provides help in any national calamity. Like in Bhuj, this year also, about 38 doctors from Maharashtra have applied in this national calamity to IMA headquarters for giving them some funds, because they had suffered lots of losses. And we are expecting help anywhere between 50 lakhs to 1 crore rupees total for these 38 doctors. IMA has I Pledge My Organs online list to help its fellow members. Now, this medical protection against violence, medical establishment and equipment, IMA runs its own medical professional national scheme, as well as Maharashtra runs its state professional protection scheme, where the benefits are lowest premium anywhere across Maharashtra by any other association. You are covered for out of court settlement up to 20 lakh. You are appointed a lawyer from IMA Maharashtra or from the headquarters, where you don't have to pay any fees for the lawyer. The scheme pays for that. And believe me, it is one of the cheapest and the best. Besides this, we have our own medico-legal team of IMA Maharashtra and IMA headquarters. They will help you in everything, whatever case is filed against you. So this is one important, but you can get this scheme only if you are a member of IMA. IMA also runs a national social security scheme where a member pays for the death of other members. Also, we have this social security scheme in Maharashtra. I know these schemes may not be lucrative because of the term insurance now, but this is a social cause where a doctor, I as a doctor, is trying to pay for the death of another colleague of mine. When I die, my family will be given that money. It is around 10 to 11 lakhs for the state scheme and around 12 to 15 lakhs for the national scheme. Without any questions asked, just your branch has to submit a letter, XYZ doctor is expired and he is a member of the social security scheme. Within 48 hours, this is approved, and in 72 hours, the check is received at the branch level, and the local branch and president can go to that person's wife or whatever it is, and to the successor and give that check. IMA Kerala runs hospital equipment protection scheme, also negotiates for equipment at special rates. We are doing this for HBA also. Those who are member of Hospital Board of India, which will come later on, they will get special privileges where we are negotiating rates for commonly used equipment and their maintenance cost also across Maharashtra. IMA supports all members during professional crisis. Members will be able to pursue most government enacting Medicare Service Personals and Medicare Acts institutions. IMA has been instrumental in this act of Maharashtra Medicare Act. This has been done only because of persistent follow-up and pressure from IMA. You must have known the episodes of Bhandardara and other places where IMA members were unnecessarily taken to task just because doctors are soft targets. It was IMA Maharashtra who stood by them, and that is the reason why they were, in spite of not being guilty, the government had asked punishment, but because IMA Maharashtra stood by them, they were not punished and they were released free of cost. IMA has independent ethics committee for promoting research amongst its members. It has independent infection control committees for guiding infection control. You can feel free and mail to IMA headquarters and you will get the policies free of cost. You can use it in your hospitals and it is very effective because it is done by think tanks. IMA Ethics Regulation 6.8H allows one to publish their research in IMA journals. Those who are working in medical colleges, they need, for a professor, they need at least 2 or 3 articles to be published in any index journal. So IMA JIMA journal is one such this. A medical practitioner shall not endorse any drug or product of the industry publicly. Any study conducted on the efficacy or otherwise of such products shall be presented to or through appropriate scientific bodies and published in appropriate. So IMA JIMA is one such where you can publish your articles if you have done any research on any drugs or anything. As I told, IMA journal is indexed and they are having MCR research requirements. Social benefits. Now, today few people have joined. I, as a treasurer of IMA Maharashtra, as a member of Meera Bhainder, have joined. I came to IMA Sangli, met few people, made friends. So friendship and fellowship is one thing which is very important for doctors. Members have privilege to stay in guest houses across various state branches and other branches all across India. The privileges of becoming IMA member, if you go to suppose IMA Tirupati. Now Tirupati has its own multi-storied guest house for doctors, and the cost is hardly 1,000 rupees or 1,500. Now the advantage is if you go to Tirupati, you want to take a darshan of Tirupati. If you are IMA member, you can call IMA office bearers of Maharashtra. We will communicate with them. We can request them, and they will help you in getting VIP darshan. So this is one more advantage. Many states and local branches of IMA clubs with special programs for spouse and children. Now IMA, we just had been to IMA Ahmednagar. They re-inaugurated and increased their hall, and they have come up with a club also where they're coming up with a swimming pool, gymnasium. So this is exclusive for IMA members. IMA provides the opportunity to participate in various sports activity. Now from next week, that is 25th till 30th, we have this IMA National Sports at Nasik. If you are free, you can definitely come there and every day have a glimpse of the event. You may not be able to participate now because the dates for the participation are already over. Social media and IMA social presence is phenomenal. It's on Facebook, it's on Twitter, it's on Instagram, and whatever work is being done by IMA, they are being posted there. Financial benefits. Now everyone says if I'm paying a membership fee of 10,000, so you can take this benefit as an expense in your company or in your personal account. Whenever whatever fees you are paying to IMA, whatever donations you are paying, they are granted exemption under ATG. IMA also runs a pension scheme. It also runs a health scheme where you can take Mediclaim from IMA, and it is one of the good Mediclaim policies. It's a group insurance. IMA helps its members in cases of death or disability through the IMA Benevolent Scheme. In case, suppose your IMA Sangli branch fees, XYZ doctor is genuinely very poor and he does not have his spouses or the successors do not have money, you can apply for this Benevolent Scheme to the state. The state will pass it on to the headquarters and some amount will be given through this Benevolent Scheme. We are already through this Benevolent Scheme only, we are trying to help the doctors who have experienced this flood and their hospitals or the diagnostic centers or the clinic were literally closed for months. IMA has a costing department which rationalizes professional fees and charges. IMA members get early bird prizes, lucky draws, and various. And in fact, in most of the CMEs, you must have noted that if you are an IMA member, the registration charges are less. If you are non-IMA member, the registration more. So eventually, in a year or two, all your membership fee what you're paying to IMA gets actually हम लोग बोलते हैं हिंदी वर्ड में वसूल हो जाता है. Association privileges. One can attend branch, state, and national IMA annual conferences and also participate in annual general meetings. One can access to local branch, state, and national IMA directory. One can network with other state and local branches. Suppose you go to Dehradun and you are stuck up there with some medical emergency or some emergency. This is where IMA stands. Because it has branches across all the districts in India, So suppose you know me, so you call me. So as the treasurer of IMA Maharashtra, I know you are stuck up in Dehradun. So what I will do, if I don't know anyone in Dehradun, I will call the national secretary or the national treasurer or the national president. Ki sir, XYZ member is stranded in Dehradun. How can it? So he will share me the number of that person there who is the president or secretary. Believe me, I have experienced this and it really works. I myself, one of my relatives was stranded, and I requested, and immediately they were taken care of, and the crisis was tied over. One can network with other state and local branches. IMA members get an opportunity to become an office bearer of local IMA branch, state branch, and IMA headquarters too. And it's a privilege, when you write on a visiting card, like I feel I am privileged as a treasurer of IMA Maharashtra, IMA members can get elected as member of CWC. Like I am a member of CWC. For every 1,000 members of a state, you get one CWC. So Maharashtra is around 45, 46 CWC members, and a central council also, one for every 500 members. I'm sure IMA Sangli must have also sent their list of central council members for your branch. Suppose if your branch is having say 750 members, so you get 2 members for central council, so you can send their names and contact numbers to IMA Maharashtra, and IMA Maharashtra makes a list and forwards it to them. These people, the CWC member and the central council members, have the voting power for electing the national people, office bearers. Privileges of IMA own medical. IMA is the Hospital Board of India, and this is the biggest achievement of IMA headquarters. In the last 5 to 7 years, IMA Hospital Board of India has come across in a big way. You all know about NABH accreditation, and IMA Maharashtra and IMA headquarters are the biggest NGO who have been facilitating hospitals to conduct the NABH accreditation program. I have done my NABH accreditation program through IMA Maharashtra, and I'm happy to inform you that I just received my first renewal, means after 3 years, again the renewal of IMA, NABH certification. Thanks to IMA HBI, they are doing hand-holding for your NABH accreditation. They look after the interests of clinical establishment owned by IMA members. We have been gone to court against this Ayush, the caption of charges and other things. IMA working for single window clearance of most regulations, legal help and protection from litigation. IMA anti-quackery cell fights against quackery in the country. IMA has its own IMA mediation and grievance cell for handling patient doctor and doctor to doctor disputes. IMA has self-conduct of code of conduct. IMA has social medical media code of conduct, legal help and protection from litigation. IMA is making code of conduct for doctor pharma, doctor chemist, doctor nurse, doctor patient, doctor hospital relationship. IMA raises issue through RT on regular basis. IMA legal cell files PL and raises issues for amendments in laws. How to respond to a complaint, IMA has a format. IMA has a white paper on what is unethical, what is rational use of antibiotics, and the dilemmas faced by medical professionals. Privileges for women members. Even women members, there are special privileges. IMA Women's Doctor Wing looks after the interests of women doctors. They have fixed quota in the working committee. And there are separate awards announced for women achievers and lifetime contribution announced on International Women's Day. National programs, as far as IMA is concerned, IMA is active partner for the RNTCP, that is a tuberculosis program. IMA clinics have an opportunity to run DOT centers, designated microscopy centers, and peripheral health institutes, and it's also participating in the pulse polio programs. International agencies, IMA has associated with Child Sexual Abuse Initiative with UNICEF. It organizes and celebrates all WHO International World and IMA days. IMA provides a platform to interact with other associations like the Nepal Association, British Association, the Kamau, the WMA. We are proud that our past national president, Dr. Ravi Wankhedkar, is the treasurer of WMA, that is World Medical Association, for the second consecutive time. The Commonwealth Medical Associations. IMA also has formed an association of other specialties of India. IMA representative is a member of Indian Nursing Council, ESIS Board, National Board, Central Council of Health and Family Welfare. In fact, nowadays, because of the active role of IMA, in fact, everywhere, maybe at a local branch, state or national level, IMA president or secretary is a member of the health committee of that particular corporation. IMA members have entered into Indian and state politics. I members also are in bureaucracy. They are also into National Medical and Wellness Tourism Board. Then we have this tuberculosis, that is the impact program where IMA is an active partner. Also, I am a member of Technical Drug Advisory Board, NABH board, then Quality Council and others. IMA influences national politics. IMA has a standing committee of all issues on national importance. In fact, we almost have annual regular stakeholder meeting, including CAMC, that is Confederation of Association of Medical Specialty of India, which includes all the specialties like pediatrics, surgery, medicine, orthopedic, everything. We have the IMA Parliamentary Doctors Wing, where all the doctor member who are MPs or MLAs, they are part of it. And almost every year we have a roundtable meet with them. We discuss the problem faced by the doctors because they themselves are doctors, and they take it forward to the Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. We have the medical student wing, those who are budding doctors who are MBBS. So for them it is the medical student wing, that is also called as MSN. We are fighting for the implementation need. IMA is lining with MCI for change in UGN curriculum. In fact, you have a few medical colleges in area. We have discussed with IMA Sangli. You can form a medical social network in your area, in that medical college, where the two representatives of the medical college, they can act as a chairman and co-chairman, and they can be part of the IMA, and we give incentives. If you have the IMA board in that medical college, 5,000 is given to the branch for that. Young doctors wing, that is the doctors who have completed MBBS but are pursuing post graduation. They are in the this, and IMA also guides doctors for the startup. IMA Kerala and Karnataka branches run coaching courses for medical professionals. IMA is also important in image building. It recognizes the service of talents within the professional members. IMA state and local branches and headquarters gives President's Appreciation Award every year. And that is a status symbol for everyone who gets that award. IMA supports startup projects. IMA honors and support doctors who author medical books. IMA has been able to get many PIs issues in professional favors like NCRT books, derogatory remarks against medical profession to have removed after a high court order. IMA has the book of medical records. Again, I've told we have the rare blood groups and also organ donation. Most members get medical benefits as per MCI members. It is IMA's code of ethics which says as a physician or as a surgeon, when a doctor comes to you, you should not charge them. So as a member of IMA, you have that privilege of showing to other members. IMA headquarters and IMA Maharashtra is offering 25% discount on life membership fees of IMA. Request the branches to also give good discount from the branch to new members up to 30th of November 2021. Membership fee of IMA will be increased by 15% with effect from 1st April 22. So it's a golden opportunity for all local branches to make new members at the discounted rates and increase the membership strength, and thus make the branch, state and headquarters stronger. We are proud to inform you that IMA Maharashtra is the single largest state with 45,000 members. It is in IMA headquarters out of the 3.5 lakh members, and we are targeting this IMA headquarters membership of 4 lakh in this up to 30th of November, and we plan to increase the membership fee of IMA Maharashtra to 50,000 before 31st March 2022. Humble appeal to all office bearers to take maximum benefit of this opportunity and make new members. Thank you. Questions, if any?
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for the widespread and knowledge enriching about IMA for all of us. As this is a recorded meeting, those who have missed can rejoin the meeting, and they can recollect the thoughts that have been shared by Dr. Rajiv Agarwal, sir. He is a treasurer of IMA Maharashtra. I am especially thankful to him because with single call of myself and madam, he has he become so active, and he has given a good lecture to us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We are privileged and looking forward for at least 100 members from IMA Sangli and IMA Miraj also. So that I would feel that has made my day.
Yes,
see, ultimately you need to realize more the strength of the association, more will be a representation in your local branch, your state and headquarters, and you can make a difference.
Yes. Now is the turn of Dr. Nemani sir. I will introduce him. Dr. Nemani is a gold medalist for his MBBS from Government Medical College Miras and MD and DM from CMC. Is so much career, I can say, throughout. I have seen his UG days, and he was the outstanding throughout his medical career. And nothing to elaborate on his academic activities and his clinical activities. We all know he's a first consultant hemato-oncologist in our area, bone marrow transplant physician. More than 20 bone marrow transplants he has done through Siddhivinayak Cancer Hospital. And I request Dr. Sandeep Nemani to continue his lecture. Over to you, Sandeep.
Audible, sir?
Yes, please.
Yes. So I first of all thank Suhas Joshi sir for giving the kind introduction. I also thank Madam Patrodhan Madam for giving me opportunity to speak for the CME of today. So the topic for today's discussion will be on hematology for all. So essentially, our group of IMA members is varied, and we have members of all specialties. So I thought to present something simple but logical and important for all the branches of practice that we do in medicine. So with this short introduction, I will start my presentation. It will be a case-based discussion. So it will help you to solve your day-to-day problems with hematological problems. So this is first case. This is 52-year-old male referred by an ophthalmologist. Majority of the cases are from our part only. So this is referred by an ophthalmologist with when he presented with central retinal vein occlusion, and when the CBC was done, they noticed that the patient has thrombocytosis. So this patient was referred to us. When he came to us, because of striking high platelet count was 16 lakhs. And in CBC, what we noticed, one more thing was the hemoglobin, which was 4.5 grams. He was anemic, but he was stable and well compensated. When there is a low hemoglobin in any patient, the next important thing that we look at in the CBC is the MCV. And the MCV was low. It was 56. So when MCV is low, we call it as microcytic anemia. So by MCV, we divide anemia as, when MCV is less than 80, we call it as microcytic. When MCV is more than 100, we call it as macrocytic. And when MCV is between 80 to 100, we call it as normocytic. So this is microcytic anemia with thrombocytosis. So CBC doesn't end on the cell counter values, but peripheral expert pathologist has to see the peripheral smear also to tell us what exactly the smear shows. And the peripheral smear examination was done, and you can see that there are cells which are elongated pencil cells. Then there are hypochromic microcytic cells are there. The central pallor of the RBCs has increased, and these are normal RBCs, and these are the cells with increased central pallor. So the peripheral smear also was suggestive of hypochromic microcytic blood picture. So the most common differential diagnosis that comes to our mind when we see a hypochromic microcytic anemia is, as all of us know, is the iron deficiency anemia. So we worked the patient for iron deficiency anemia, and we found that iron was low, ferritin was low, transferrin saturation was low, and the TIBC, the transfer iron binding capacity was increased. So it's a case of iron deficiency anemia. So this is not the end of the diagnosis. Like when we say it's an iron deficiency anemia, important thing is we have to see why a male patient has developed iron deficiency anemia. So usually the cause is blood loss. So we tested for stool local blood, and then that came out to be positive, and we referred the patient for gastroenterological evaluation to rule out any cause in the intestines which is causing GI bleeding. That is the part of anemia. Now, the second question remains in this case is why the patient has thrombocytosis, and why, because of thrombocytosis, he has developed venous occlusion. So it's important to know that thrombocytosis is a common finding in iron deficiency anemia. Some severe iron deficiency anemias, compensated iron deficiency anemias have thrombocytosis known. And it is to be always, when you see a patient of thrombocytosis, you should always rule out cases like splenectomy. Post-splenectomy also may have thrombocytosis. Then iron deficiency also needs to be ruled out. Thrombocytosis is seen in around 60% cases of iron deficiency anemia. And when you start the treatment for iron deficiency anemia, the thrombocytosis will resolve in around a month's time. So this patient, we have started with oral iron therapy because patient was stable and well compensated. We didn't transfuse the patient, and slowly after 7 days, the hemoglobin started increasing and the platelet started normalizing. As the guideline says, by 30 days, the platelet has become normal and his vision also has started improving. So this is a case of iron deficiency anemia. So coming to second case, this is 22-year-old female, is 2 months pregnant now. We are switching to gynecologist now, and HB is not improving with iron supplements. So patient was referred to us. Again, we see the CBC. What the counter shows is the hemoglobin, which is low, 8.8. As I told you, the next important thing to be seen when hemoglobin is low is the MCV. MCV is low, so it is less than 80. We call it as microcytic anemia. Peripheral smear examination was done. It showed microcytic hypochromic RBCs with many target cells, and studies were done that were normal. So iron deficiency is ruled out. So 90% of the cases with microcytic anemias are iron deficiency, and that is ruled out. So then next important thing is to rule out is thalassemia minor, and then HB electrophoresis was done. It was HbA2 high, so suggestive of beta thalassemia minor. So this pregnant female is suffering from beta thalassemia minor, which is just a carrier status for thalassemia, which doesn't require any treatment as such. The most important thing is to do a CBC of a husband, because she's 2 months pregnant, and this is an opportunity to do a CBC in the husband. And here, when we did the CBC for husband, we found that the hemoglobin is little low, MCV also low here. Same workup was done for the husband, and we found that the husband is also suffering from thalassemia minor. So both the husband wife are having thalassemia minor or thalassemia trait with 2 months pregnancy. The next important thing is to do is the antenatal diagnosis. So antenatal diagnosis was done, and we found that the fetus is suffering from beta thalassemia homozygous. So patient was referred to gynecologist for MTP because it's an important disease to prevent thalassemia major. I think everybody of us know about thalassemia major. The children will require blood transfusion from starting from 6 months of age. Lifelong, they will require blood transfusion. It is commonest single gene disorder in our country, and almost 10,000 children are born each year with thalassemia major. So it's very important to prevent birth of thalassemia. The only best possible thing that we can do is prevention, and by simple testing of looking at CBC properly, and also by looking at the HB electrophoresis, we can rule out thalassemia minor in the pregnant female, and then we can rule out the birth of thalassemia major children. Next important thing is the Metzger's index. It's the older practitioners are very fond of this index, the Metzger's index, and by depending upon the CBC and the Metzger's index, they used to divide thalassemia minor and iron deficiency anemia. So this is simple index where MCV is divided by the RBC count. And when the Metzger's index is less than 13, they used to call it as thalassemia minor. And when it is more than 13, it is iron deficiency anemia. So what I did was I did an exercise to all our 3 cases to apply the Metzger's index and see what happens. So our first case, as you remember, that was the patient with central retinal vein occlusion with iron deficiency anemia. We applied the Metzger's index, MCV divided by RBC count. We found it is 16.8. It is more than 13. It's correlating with iron deficiency anemia. The second case was the wife who was pregnant. So here the Metzger's index 68 is the MCV divided by RBC count. It is 16.5. So it falls into iron deficiency, but actually she was suffering from thalassemia minor. So it's not fitting into the criteria. And Metzger's index for husband, MCV divided by RBC count, it is 8.8. It is less than 13. So it is thalassemia minor. For husband, it is fitting. So a Metzger's index can give you a rough idea, but you cannot go with Metzger's index alone to say whether it's iron deficiency or thalassemia minor. You should always do an HB electrophoresis when iron deficiency anemia is ruled out. So as I was telling, when you have a patient of low hemoglobin, don't say that the patient is suffering from anemia or the treatment is blood transfusion. Always remember that we have to first classify, we have to divide and then rule. And once we classify the anemia, it becomes very easy to get some differential diagnosis at what the patient could be suffering from. So if a patient has low hemoglobin and with MCV of less than 80, we call it as microcytic anemia. MCV between 80 to 100, we call it as normocytic anemia. And MCV more than 100, we call it as macrocytic anemia. So for microcytic anemia, we have only 4 differential diagnoses. The commonest is iron deficiency anemia. The second is thalassemia minor that we already discussed. Then there is a sideroblastic anemia and anemia of chronic disease. These are quite relatively rare. Sideroblastic anemia is quite rare. But anemia of chronic disease we encounter in patients with chronic kidney disease or any inflammatory states, SLE, rheumatological diseases, where we can find mild microcytic anemia. When MCV is between 80 to 100, we call it as normocytic anemia. And here there are a lot of differential diagnoses of hematological origin plus anemia of chronic diseases. And when MCV is more than 100, we call it as macrocytic anemia. Here again, the commonest differential diagnosis when MCV is more than 100 is megaloblastic anemia due to B12 and folic acid deficiency. And rest then other diseases comes. And also in patients with chronic alcoholism, hypothyroidism, liver disease, again, the MCV could be little high and there could be borderline anemia. So classification of low hemoglobin or anemia is very important depending upon the MCV. Next important thing in anemia is when you know that the patient is anemic and you know what is the MCV and you have divided the patient in the depending on the size of the RBCs. The important thing to come is whether it's a production problem or the destruction problem. So it could be production problem in the bone marrow, or it could be iron deficiency B12 where again it's a production problem, or it could be hemolytic anemia, or it could be excessive blood loss that is causing survival or destruction. So when you have to answer this question, you cannot do a bone marrow for each and every anemic patient to know whether it's a production problem or survival problem. The important test to do is the reticulocyte count. And in reticulocyte count, if you see, these are the remnants of RNA that are there in the RBCs which are a little larger. These are called reticulocytes. These are the new RBCs which are just thrown into the circulation. Nucleus is removed, but the RNA is still there. And the pathologist counts this reticulocytes amongst other RBCs and they will give you the percentage. So if retic count is high, that means the patient is suffering from peripheral destruction or the hemolysis. If retic count is low, that means the patient is having production problem causing anemia. As I earlier told you, iron deficiency anemia is very important to rule out what is the cause for iron deficiency anemia. When you have to always ask for menstrual history, you should rule out hematuria, you should rule out GI bleeding, you should do a stool occult blood testing for at least for 3 days. You should the parasitic infection can cause stool occult blood positivity. So these things are very important when you treat the patient with iron deficiency anemia. Otherwise, the patient will have relapse of its anemia if these primary problems are not taken care of. Coming to next case, this is 45-year-old male. Outside workup was done for pancytopenia and bone marrow was done that was labeled as myelodysplastic syndrome. It's a precancerous condition and the patient was referred to us. When the patient came to us, we saw the CBC, his hemoglobin was low, MCV was normal, between normal range. WBC count looks normal, but there is left shift with some blast cells in our peripheral smear. Platelet count was also little low. So it's a case of pancytopenia with normal MCV. Peripheral smear examination was done. It showed mixed picture, little normocytes, little macrocytes. There were a few NRBCs were there on the peripheral smear. And on peripheral smear examination, we find this. These are the neutrophils increased segments. So when the neutrophils is more than 5 segments, we call it as hypersegmented neutrophil. And such neutrophils are typically seen in megaloblastic anemia. So we did workup further and we found that the retic was low. So it's a hypoproliferative anemia. And LDH was very high. So in megaloblastic anemia, due to dyserythropoiesis, there is high LDH. LDH is in thousands. B12 level was low. Folate levels are normal. We diagnosed the patient a simple case of megaloblastic anemia, treated with parenteral B12 therapy. The patient's pancytopenia has recovered. So very important to know that there are a lot of causes of dysplasia on bone marrow. So you can find dysplasia because of B12 deficiency, folic acid deficiency, alcohol abuse, patient with HIV, HBCG, HCV infection, some medications, methotrexate, valproate can cause dysplasias on the bone marrow. So it's important that MDS should be a diagnosis of exclusion and it's not a diagnosis of choice. You should rule out other causes which can cause dysplasia, and then you should think of some treatable causes which can be treated. And then finally, if you are left with nothing, then you can think of if this patient may be suffering from myelodysplastic syndrome. Coming to megaloblastic anemia, as I told you, hypersegmented neutrophils are seen. LDH is very high. Some indirect bilirubemia, hyperbilirubinemia may be there, and the B12 folate level can give you the answer. So this is briefly about anemia. Now I will tell you about little bit about thrombocytopenia. So this is young female came 2 to 3 years back to me with a diagnosed case of ITP since childhood. So she was from her young age, she was been given multiple courses of steroids, stating that she had ITP and her platelet were always low. She never had any bleeding manifestation. Her menstrual history was also normal. Now she wanted to get married. She was concerned that her platelet always remained low. She had taken multiple courses of steroid with side effects, but without any benefit in the platelet count. So she came to us for an opinion. We did the CBC. We found that the platelet count is 12,000 on this machine. Then we did the peripheral smear examination. So here the peripheral smear examination is important. See this. This is the sea of platelets. The platelets are stick to each other. So this all are platelets. It's not a 12,000 platelet count smear. So it's normal platelet count smear, but the platelets have stick together. It so causing the platelet cannot be counted on the machine because of the platelets are just clumped together. So it cannot be counted. So what we did was we did the platelet count in a citrate sample. We changed the anticoagulant and the platelet count came as 2.2 lakhs. So it's a case of EDTA-induced pseudothrombocytopenia. So the EDTA, the reagent, the purple tube that we use for CBC, sometimes in some patients can have clumping and causing pseudothrombocytopenia. So if we change the anticoagulant that is used, the platelet count normalizes. It's very important. I had seen many patients in various hospitals with dengue fever continuously getting transfused for 10, 15, 20 days without improvement in the platelet count. And we find that the patient is suffering from EDTA-induced pseudothrombocytopenia. So it's very important to get a good peripheral smear examination done before labeling that the patient is having a true thrombocytopenia. So it's again a known fact that EDTA can cause clumping in some patients. Always think of pseudothrombocytopenia before labeling the patient is having a true thrombocytopenia. Because it is important in patients where the patient doesn't have any symptoms due to thrombocytopenia. So first, as we have discussed, is EDTA-induced thrombocytopenia and platelet satellitism. Sometimes the platelet gets sticked around the neutrophils, causing platelet satellitism. Third is giant platelets. Because the platelet size increases so much so that it approaches the size of other RBCs. So machine get confused between the RBC and the platelet, whether it's because the machine only calculates the platelet or the RBCs depending upon the size. So if size of platelet is more and is equal to RBC, that means the machine will count these platelets as RBCs. So thus there will be pseudothrombocytopenia on the machine. Coming to next case, this is 9-year-old male was treated for thrombocytopenia with bleeding manifestation outside. He had a true thrombocytopenia, and he was suspected to have ITP, immune thrombocytopenia, because at this age, the only diagnosis that comes to the mind is the immune thrombocytopenia. So patient was given steroid pulse, but the platelet did not improve and the patient bleeding manifestation persisted. So the patient was referred to us. When he came to us, there was isolated thrombocytopenia with hemoglobin and WBC count fairly normal. We did his bone marrow examination. This was the aspirate, and this was the biopsy. So to tell you in brief what it showed all cell lines were present, but what is absent was the megakaryocytes. So the platelet producing cells in the bone marrow are the megakaryocytes, and which are absent in the bone marrow. So it's not a case of ITP where the platelet production should be normal. It's the case where the platelet production is absent. So it's a case of megakaryocytic thrombocytopenia. It's a type of aplastic anemia where the platelet production is not there in the bone marrow. So it's all patients, 99% times you may be correct in this age group that it is ITP, but sometimes there could be a rare possibilities that some other diagnosis can be there in such situation. So if any resident doctors call me that the patient is suffering from thrombocytopenia because of any reason, maybe dengue fever, maybe any viral fever, or maybe ITP. The first, when he says me that the doctor, I have a patient with low platelet count, I ask him what is his hemoglobin and what is his WBC count. So the purpose of asking this question is I want to ask whether it's an isolated thrombocytopenia or it's a pancytopenia. So then they say that hemoglobin is normal, WBC count is normal, differential is normal. And then the next question come to my mind is whether it's really a true thrombocytopenia or false thrombocytopenia. So then the patient has bleeding manifestation, it's a true thrombocytopenia confirmed. Then the third question that comes in our mind is whether it's an immune thrombocytopenia or non-immune thrombocytopenia, for which we do a bone marrow testing, and to confirm that the bone marrow production of platelet is normal, we call it as immune thrombocytopenia. And when there is some bone marrow problem or some alternative diagnosis, some viral infection, some HIV, HBCG infection that comes positive, we call it as non-immune thrombocytopenia. Very hot topic is the dengue fever. Generally, platelet transfusion is not required. Even up to 10,000, you can wait sometimes without any bleeding manifestation. A patient is very stable. 20,000 is very safe cutoff. So about 20,000 without bleeding, no need for any platelet transfusion. You can wait up to 10,000, but less than 20,000, yes, you can think of transfusing. But about 20,000, no need for any platelet transfusion. Coming to a case with a bleeding disorder. Again, this patient was referred to us from civil hospital. This is 35-year-old female admitted with multiple hematomas. She had multiple skin hematomas everywhere on the body. She had history of IC bleed, intracranial hemorrhage in childhood. She had underwent 7 surgical procedures till now in past with multiple RBC transfusions. So she used to bleed during surgeries and she used to get operated for hematomas. Some surgeries were done. 7 surgical procedures were done. Multiple workups for bleeding was done, but no diagnosis was done on what is the cause for her bleeding manifestation. She had 4 early abortions. Hysterectomy also was done with the RBC transfusions and plasma transfusions. Hysterectomy was also done, but that did not work, and she persisted to have developing hematomas. Her investigations were done. CBC looks normal except for iron deficiency anemia due to blood loss. With PT, APDT, and bleeding time was also normal. So essentially, this is what the screening workup that we do. That PT, APDT, bleeding time, platelet count. This is what we do to rule out there is any bleeding disorder or not. Finally, we thought of it could be a factor 13 deficiency. So we did urea clot lysis test, and we found that the patient is suffering from factor 13 deficiency. Patient was treated with cryoprecipitates, and patient was well. So important thing to notice in this case is there is screening workup can be negative in a factor 13 deficiency. This is the only coagulopathy where our screening workup, the PT, APDT, BT, everything can be normal. Second important thing is the abortions. So the factor 13 is very important for implantation. So she has recurrent abortions and IC bleed. So IC bleed again is very important, and it's usually a finding in factor 13 deficiency. If you remember from your early pediatric days, they say that the patient who have delayed umbilical stump bleeding can have factor 13 deficiency. So this history is also very important, that if patient presents in a childhood, then you can ask for umbilical stump bleeding, and if that is there, you can think of either a fibrinogenemia, or you can think of factor 13 deficiency. This is what the screening test. I will not go into the detail of this chart because it's a separate topic in itself about the screening and how to evaluate for the bleeding disorders. But important is when we do our 4 tests, the platelet count, bleeding time, PT, APDT, all can be normal in factor 13 deficiency. So you should always keep in your mind that history is very important. The patient's history of bleeding is very important. And if that is normal, then only you should think of a patient has a high bleeding history with all screening workup normal, still the patient can be a bleeder. Coming to next case with pancytopenia. This is 4-year-old male child with hepatosplenomegaly and pancytopenia. Here, the patient received some medications outside for 2 months. Details and records were not available. So when a patient comes to us with cytopenia and record of treatment is not available, we presume that the patient might have received some steroids, because it's like I had seen almost every patient of cytopenia undiagnosed for a long time receives steroid. So I will tell you what happens next. So this pancytopenia is still persisting. So the patient came to us. It showed some few atypical looking cells. Bone marrow aspirate also showed similar atypical looking cells. Bone marrow biopsy was done. Nothing much conclusive, looks normal. These are the megakaryocytes. These were missing in the previous case, and the rest of trial hematopoiesis was there. So we were stuck up, like the patient has hepatosplenomegaly, patient has pancytopenia, patient is otherwise stable. So we don't know what exactly is happening. So we just kept a differential diagnosis of regenerating marrow, some viral insult, something has happened, and the patient is regenerating from that. So we just kept a close follow-up on the patient. So patient used to come every 15 days for follow-up just to show what is happening. And apparently count showed improvement, but organomegaly, the liver and spleen both persisted. Kept a close follow-up. And when he came after 3 months, we found this was the peripheral smear. There were WBC count was 1.5 lakhs. All peripheral smear was studied with blast. So it's a case of ALL. It was BALL. We started chemotherapy. Patient is apparently well now. The important thing is the precious time was wasted, because all hematological malignancies, the lymphomas, myelomas, leukemias, everything is very steroid sensitive. Even the pre-medication hydrocortisone that is used for blood transfusion in a cytopenic patient, that can suppress the disease for some time. So we are very skeptical about steroid usage before diagnosis. After diagnosis, we are using steroid like water, but before diagnosis, when we use steroid, the precious time of diagnosis can be missed, and sometimes we may get stuck up in the cases as how to diagnose such patients. So it's very important in undiagnosed cytopenic patient never to use steroids. Into next case of hematolymphoid malignancy. This is 24-year-old male with constitutional symptoms. This is again a patient from Sangli only. So detected to abdominal lymphadenopathy. So there were gross lymphadenopathy was there. Biopsy was done. USG guide biopsy was done, and that showed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So patient was given 3 cycles of CHOP chemotherapy outside, and then patient came to us because he in the interim analysis after 3 cycles of CHOP chemotherapy, patient did not show any improvement, or the lymph node sizes has not reduced. So because progressive disease was there, he came to us. We got his slide blocks reviewed at our hospital. and it again on histopathological examination showed NHL. So this was his slide. These mononuclear cells are all looking like lymphoid cells on the histopathological examination. Then we went ahead and did the IHC. Immunohistochemistry was done, and that showed OCT4 and SAL4 positive. And this case turned out to be a case of metastatic seminoma. It is not a case of lymphoma. So again, it's important to know that only on histopathological examination, we cannot treat the patient nowadays. We should always do the higher tests like flow cytometry, the immunohistochemistry, or other tests. I encounter a lot of patients who are being treated as leukemias or lymphomas, but no IHC or no further workup has been done. So it's very important that we do full workup of the patient before we start treating the patient. And then, or otherwise, such mishaps can happen in some cases. So last case I would just like to discuss. This is 40-year-old male, doctor himself from our Sangli district, sensory motor peripheral neuropathy, diagnosed as CIDP by neurologist. Patient, as the patient has neuropathy, the protein electrophoresis was done because the nephrologist and the neurologist both do M-band in their patients, and it came positive. So patient was referred to me to rule out multiple myeloma. So multiple myeloma, if you remember, there are 4 features: hypercalcemia, renal failure, anemia, and bone lesions. So we called as acronym as CRAB. So there were no CRAB features in him. Nothing was there. Then bone marrow was done because M-band was positive. Bone marrow aspirate biopsy, both were normal. So now we have 2 things. One, it could be an isolated M-band positive, which could be not significant, and there is no disease defining events in the patient. We can just leave him alone, and the neurologist can continue his treatment. So we went ahead and did a PET scan because he was a doctor. He was ready to get all the workup done. The PET scan showed an isolated 4 by 5 centimeter pit-ivid lesion in the pelvis. And biopsy was done that showed as plasmacytoma. So here we confirm that the patient had plasmacytoma, which has caused the M-band to be positive. And again, it is because of the paraprotein deposition, he is having peripheral neuropathy. Patient was treated with chemotherapy and followed by autologous stem cell transplant was done. And the patient is currently doing well. This case was transplanted in 2017. And now 4 years down the line, he is in remission. This is his PET-CT scan at diagnosis. There is no lesion elsewhere in the skeleton. Everything was normal. Only a single 4 by 5 centimeter lesion. And you can see the post-treatment PET scan, which is showing complete resolution. And currently also he is doing well. So this is very important to do complete workup in the patients. And the newer modalities of the PET scan that has come in our Sangli city is really helping the patients to diagnose them accurately and to stage them properly. Coming to our transplant data that we have done transplant in Sangli district, this is around we started transplant program at Cancer Hospital in January 2017. We have performed 20 cases, 20 bone marrow transplants, 6 autologous transplants were done, 4 for myeloma patients and 2 for relapsed Hodgkin's lymphomas. 14 allogenic transplants were done for AML, ALL, and aplastic anemias. The transplant-related mortality or the patient dying within 100 days of transplant, we had 3 patients who expired within this time frame. So it is 15%. We take it around 20% TRM, transplant-related mortality is fair enough for any transplant unit to perform. So it's quite early days. We have to arrange a lot of funds, money for doing transplants in our part. So the number may look less, but definitely, yes, we are doing it for quite a bit time now. And we are trying to enroll as many patients for the transplant. With this, I end my discussion. I will take question in the end as per the organizer's permit. Thank you. Thank you very much.
There is one question in the chat box till that. Did you see? What should be the pre-transfusion hemoglobin level in thalassemia? Is it 9 to 9.5 or 7 grams %?
So can I answer, madam?
Yeah.
So for thalassemia, the cutoff is 9 grams. So we should keep pre-transfusion hemoglobin 9 grams. The reason for doing that is the growth of the child is very important in the growing age. So if we keep the pre-transfusion HB 9 and post-transfusion HB around 12 to 13 grams, that helps proper growth of the patient. And so it's very important that the pre-transfusion HB is kept around 9. The problem with our patients is later on they develop hypersplenism, spleen becomes huge, and the transfusion requirement increases, and their relatives also get fed up for recurrent transfusion. So sometimes the transfusion cutoff drops down. The other problem that happens is the iron overloading. So once you keep the higher cutoffs of transfusion, that means you have to transfuse frequently and you have to transfuse more. So in that situation, what happens is more and more iron is deposited and more iron overload happens. So in this situation, you have to be very sure that you are chelating the patient properly. and you are keeping a tight control on the iron status as well when you hypertransfuse the patient. So, but it's very important to keep a good hemoglobin so that the growth is not hampered and the patient doesn't develop the other endocrine problems or the growth related problems later on in the later life.
Abhijit has completed his MBBS from Government Medical College Miraj in 1994. He has done his post-graduation in pathology at Dr. VM Medical College Solapur. He is the ex-resident of Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai. He is blood transfusion officer at Bridge Candy Hospital, Mumbai, and immune histology and stem cell training he has got at TMH Mumbai. Present attachment, he is the transfusion medicine and consultant at head of the Department of Transfusion Medicine and Blood Bank at Siddhivinayak Cancer Hospital, core member of bone marrow transplant unit at the same hospital. His achievements are he is a faculty and chairperson and guest speaker at national conferences of Indian Society of Transfusion Medicine, Indian Society of Hematology and Blood Transfusion, Indian Society of Blood Transfusion, Hematology, Hemato-oncology. He is an MMC accredited speaker and for various CMEs, and he is life member of ISBTI. Basically, to all the viewers, I am just complimenting both of these two speakers. That means Dr. Sandeep Nemani and Abhijit Udgaonkar are assets to our faculty, fraternity, and society, I will say. They are working together for hematology, but they are working differently for patients for different diseases. And one has some mastery in hemato-oncology and one has some mastery in blood transfusion related diseases. Now I will invite Abhijit to present his case. Abhijit, please.
First, let me thank the organizing committee of the Sangli IMA for giving me this opportunity to share this dais. Actually, this case, transfusion-related acute lung injury, was actually I presented this few years back in National Conference of Indian Society of Hematology and Blood Transfusion at Taj, Mumbai, which was organized by well-known hematologist Dr. M.B. Agarwal. My senior colleagues and my friends, generally when we see about the blood transfusion reactions, what does come to our mind? Generally, we say probably there is mismatched transfusion or any incompatible transfusion. So that means hemolytic transfusion reaction. But nowadays, if you get the blood from a good blood bank, that means blood bank following the proper protocols, then generally these are becoming rare and rare. Secondly, when we get the mismatched transfusions with advent of newer grouping and serology, these are also becoming lesser and lesser. With newer advent and technologies, these are happening. Secondly, second thing most commonly comes to our mind is the viral or bacterial transmission through transfusions. But nowadays we are doing chemiluminescence assay in our blood bank as well. Then the newer advent of nucleic acid testing, this virus transmission will go less and less. And so that is also going out of our main problems. So transfusion-related acute lung injury. This is a newer problem we are facing nowadays. Generally, it is under-recognized, under-reported, but due to other reactions are becoming less and less, it is becoming one of the most important cause of transfusion-related mortality and morbidity. So we move towards this transfusion-related acute lung injury. What is TRALI? It is sudden onset of acute lung respiratory failure with pulmonary edema occurring within 2 to 6 hours of transfusions, associated with any blood component which contains plasma. Means it is possible even occurring with the red blood cells or whole blood, RDPs, SDPs, then granulocytes, everything. But more commonly, it is associated with the high plasma volume components like FFPs, pooled platelets, and apheresis platelets. Even those have been observed with components which are having very less plasma, means plasma derivatives like immunoglobulins. Means even after immunoglobulin infusion, we can detect, we can have TRALI. Previously in 1950s, it was reported as a non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema. The research was going on in 1985. they clearly defined, means Popovsky et al. Clearly defined this as a clinical entity post-transfusion. But what happened with newer and newer paper presentations, newer and newer research, we associated it with transfusion. So it became transfusion-associated lung injury. The incidence is 1 in 5,000 and to 10,000 transfusions. Generally, we see that it occurs within 2 to 6 hours of transfusion, so that way it is classical trialing. But sometimes we observe even delayed trials occurring within after 48 hours of the transfusion. Now we'll see the case. A few years back, a 48-year-old male patient with acute myeloid leukemia admitted in our hospital. His hemoglobin was 6.4 gram percent, platelet count was 12,005 microliter, and having deranged coagulation profile. He was hemodynamically stable. His blood pressure was 130 to 80 millimeter of mercury. Pulse rate and respiratory rate was also within normal limits. So we started blood transfusions. First 2 units of Paxils were given, followed by 4 units of RDPs, and followed by 4 units of FFPs. Within a transfusion of 2 hours of the last unit of FFP, we observed that patient was complaining, difficulty in breathing, some chills, and non-productive cough. Luckily, that era was not of COVID. Otherwise, everybody would have thought that it might be COVID, and the first test might have been done as a rapid antigen test or RT-PCR. But that was not the era. Then we checked the blood pressure, pulse, and respiratory rate. A patient was hypotensive and having tachycardia and tachypnea. He was cynosed and having mild fever. A physical examination revealed signs of pulmonary edema. There was diffuse reduction in breath sound throughout the lungs. Diffuse crackles were there on the auscultation as well. So immediately patient shifted to the ICU. Chest X-ray was done, and see, these are the white-out lungs. Diffuse haziness throughout the lung fields, and but still cardiac celerity was normal. So it happens to be non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema. Then patient was investigated properly. His SpO2 was 80%. His arterial blood acid gas ABG analysis showed that PO2 is around 67 millimeter of mercury. His central venous pressure was within normal range, and echocardiography was normal. His jugular venous pressures and was normal. Then even he was not hypertensive. So everything was suggesting that it is not transfusion-associated circulatory overload. Because what happened, we have transfused almost 8 units of blood units, means 2 units of Paxils, 4 platelets, and 4 FFPs. Before that, even IV fluids were given. So we thought of transfusion-associated circulatory overload. Those patients also present with respiratory distress, but in those cases, there used to be signs of circulatory overload. Here, there was no signs of any circulatory overload. The patient was hypotensive, and so that's why that cause was ruled out. Then patient's blood was sent for the culture to rule out the septicemia, and every time any blood reaction occurs, we send the sample to the blood bank. When we receive in the blood bank, and we do the compatibility testing, which was pre-transfusion compatibility testing and post-transfusion compatibility testing. But those testing revealed that there was no mismatched transfusion, no incompatibility, nothing. So we were thinking about what could be the diagnosis, what could be the reason for this respiratory distress. We observed that it is non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema occurring specifically within 2 hours of the transfusion, and there was no previous acute lung injury. So why this happened? And the diagnosis came to our mind, that is TRALI. Once the diagnosis of TRALI comes to our mind, we started the treatment. What is the treatment? Patient was immediately patient was oxygenally kept on the oxygen support to maintain his SpO2. Still the patient was hypotensive, so mechanical ventilator start, even endotracheal intubation done. And then patient was a little bit under control. Then we started IV fluids to maintain his blood pressure. Subsequently, on the 3rd day, patient started showing some of the improvement. Then 4th day, we repeated the chest exercise again. So we see the change. just immediately after the transfusion on the same day, whiteout lungs, and after 4 days, clear lungs without any residual lung damage. So this is the change we observed just within 3 to 4 days, and patient was out of the problem on 5th day. He shifted out of the ICU on 5th day, and then it was total recovery without any residual problem. So this was the TRALI, and North American European Consensus Conference recommended criteria for TRALI diagnosis, TRALI and possible TRALI, both of acute onset, hypoxemia, SpO2 less than 90 degree on room air, bilateral infiltration on chest X-ray, no evidence of left atrial hypertension, that is circulatory overload, no pre-existing acute lung injury before transfusion. Everything is same. Hypoxemia within 6 hours of transfusion. So all criteria of TRALI are there. So what is the difference between TRALI and possible TRALI? In TRALI, there is no temporal relationship to an alternative risk factor for acute lung injury. So nothing is there to suggest that some other things are there associated with the TRALI. So it is a classical TRALI. In possible TRALI, we get some temporal relationship with any alternative risk factors, means any lung condition developing within those 6 hours, means aspiration pneumonia or any other thing related to lung injury. If we detect that, we can say that it is possible TRALI. So why the diagnosis of possible TRALI is also important? Because to just make the more awareness in clinicians about this TRALI, because it is treatable condition, and we want to reduce the under recognition and under reporting of TRALI. So that's why this possible TRALI has been suggested by North American European Consensus Conferences. So now we know about the TRALI. Now we'll see etiopathogenesis behind it. It is actually immunohematological reaction. It is an antigen-antibody reactions. What happens when we give the blood to the patient containing plasma? In that donor plasma, there are antibodies. There could be antibodies which are against human leukocyte antigen or human neutrophil antigens, which are present in the patient. So that plasma goes into the patient's circulation. Now that blood goes into the circulation, alveolar pulmonary vasculature. There, the patient is having leukocyte or neutrophil antigens, and those antibodies attach to those antigens, and neutrophil gets activated in that pulmonary vasculature. Now neutrophil gets activated, secretes some cytotoxic agents. Those cytotoxic agents act on endothelial cell lining of that vasculature, causing damage to it, and then capillary leakage starts. This leakage contains high amount of proteins, and that capillary leak is there everywhere in interstitial spaces, alveolar spaces. So diffusion of oxygen gets hampered and leading to acute lung injury and pulmonary edema. So this is the etiopathogenesis in 90% of the cases of TRALI. Rarely reverse reaction between donor leukocyte antigens and recipient antibodies can occur. Means antigens coming from donor plasma which react with the antibodies present in the patient's vasculature. But this is rarely not much common, because generally leukocyte pool in the patient is much more as compared to the leukocyte or leukocyte antigens coming from the donor. So that's why first reaction is more common, where the reaction takes place between HLA antibodies or HNA antibodies in donor plasma with leukocyte and neutrophil antigens of the recipient. Another mechanism is two-hit model. What happened? It has been observed that in some trials we couldn't find any antibodies, donor antibodies, I mean to say. Even sometimes it has been observed that donor antibodies pool is very small. Still the trial is happening. So the research suggested that something might be there, and then this two-hit model came into practice, came into existence. This contains two events. First event is predisposing inflammatory condition. Example, sepsis, trauma. Patient is having some problem, sepsis, trauma, any infection or something like that. What happens with this pro-inflammatory condition? Patient's endothelial cells in pulmonary vasculatures gets activated, neutrophils get primed, and those neutrophils after priming gets attached to the endothelial cells, and then bioactive lipids or cytokines coming from the donor. How the bioactive lipids and cytokines come from the donor? when we store the blood units, means plasma or platelets or RBCs, anything, when we store, there is a storage lesion. Means after some days, the leukocytes present in that blood started getting lysed. When they lyse, they secrete cytokines as well as the bioactive lipids from their cell layers gets liberated into that blood or blood component. And those bioactive lipids and cytokines through that infusion comes into the patient's body, and those bioactive lipids and cytokines activates prime neutrophils. And once that neutrophils are activated, similar mechanism takes place as we have seen, that capillary leakage and endothelial damage and capillary leakage and pulmonary edema. So this same things happen. So these are the two events happening in this 2-hit model. Then it has been observed that it could be a modified 2-hit model, means that first step is common, like predisposing inflammatory condition, but second step could be due to biolipid exposure, or it could be, as previously seen, we have seen antigen antibody reaction because of that. So now we have to differentiate these other common transfusion reactions before arriving to the diagnosis of transfusion related acute lung injury, because these are the more common reactions. And first we have to rule out those reactions. TACO. Generally what happens when we lot of transfusions, patients may land into circulatory overload. He may present like respiratory distress and similar findings like Praلی. But if you see, in Praly there is a hypotension, in TACO there is hypertension and increased central venous pressure, etc. So by that point we can differentiate between TACO and Praly. Then hemolytic transfusion reaction. But generally the symptoms are a little bit different. The patient presents with hypotension, but he may present with the flank pains. He might be having hemoglobinuria and lands into acute renal failure. So presentation is a little bit different. And we can send the sample to the blood bank and can rule out hemolytic transfusion reaction. Then allergic or anaphylactic reactions also present, like this patient comes with hypotension, some respiratory distress. But here chest X-ray is normal, and generally respiratory distress is to laryngeal edema and bronchospasm. Then another thing is transfusion of bacterial contaminated blood unit. But nowadays it is becoming rare, and most of the times it happens with platelet transfusions. That is one of the important thing, because the platelet generally stored at 22 degrees centigrade. So it is a conducive temperature for the bacterial growth. So it is more commonly associated with the platelet transfusions. And secondly, by clinical findings, a good clinician definitely can rule out between septicemia and Praly. In septicemia, there would be a predominant feature would be fever associated with the shock symptoms. So now we are diagnosed Praly clinically. Now we have to confirm it by radiological. So once you do the chest X-ray, white out lungs, clear cut, it is a diagnosis of Praly. Mainly it is a clinical suspicion, keen observation, and then radiological examination. That will give you the diagnosis of Praly. Whether there are any laboratory tests to confirm it, actually in our clinical practice, it is not possible to diagnose Praly by a laboratory test. The laboratory tests are there, but they are more of an academic interest, research interest, because which test we want to do are not possible in most of the blood banks and laboratories. Only few centers in India can do this test. One of the center near ours is National Institute of Hematology at Mumbai. They can do it. Here, what we do, that we take the donor sera and recipient's neutrophils. We do the granulocyte cross-match, or even one can do anti-HLA, anti-HNA antibody detection in patients or donor sera by immunofluorescence or on flow cytometry or agglutination methods. But these are of the academic interest, and if you have the diagnosis of Praly, save the patient, and at a later date you send the sample of that donor and patient to the reference laboratories to confirm the diagnosis of Praly. But at the time, clinical awareness, clinical suspicion, and timely intervention associated with the radiological support for the chest, that means chest X-ray. These are the most important points for the diagnosis. Then how to treat? Once patients started developing respiratory distress, first stop the transfusion, then start the oxygen support, mechanical ventilation. IV fluids are given to maintain the blood pressure and cardiac output. If still patient is having hypotension, then one can try vasopressor agents. Now steroids. Whenever we want to immunosuppress or we want anti-inflammatory effect, we always say the steroids are important. Steroids can do the things, but steroids are not effective in case of alloantibodies. Alloantibodies means antibodies coming from other person. They can suppress your own antibodies, autoantibodies, but they cannot suppress alloantibodies which are coming from the donor. And here the implicating antibodies are coming from the donors. So those steroids won't be useful in those conditions in TRALI. So that's why steroids use is controversial. Also, with steroids, if the patient is on the ventilator, our clinician friends, ICU friends are more knowledgeable about that. What steroids can do on the patient on ventilator. Just by doing this, you can save the patient. It is mostly self-limiting. Within 2 to 3 days, patient can come out of it without any residual lung damage. So that's why the recognition of the condition, reporting of the condition is very important. By doing that, you can save the patient, and then fatality rate can be only 5 to 10%. Otherwise, it might be much more than that. So that's why clinical suspicion, timely intervention. Again, I'm repeating because that is very important in recognizing this condition. And how to prevent the condition? Every time we know how to prevent it. But what happens? We cannot prevent it from the patient side, a patient point of view, because this trial is not patient-centric. It is a donor-centric process. That means a patient gets TRALI. That means most of the times he is not again going to get TRALI, but that donor from whose donation that blood has come can cause TRALI in another patient as well. So it is a donor-centric because the donor antibodies are responsible in 90% of the cases. So the blood center has to be reported. Clinical unit has to report the blood center that this looks to be TRALI. So that blood center should defer that implicated donor permanently. That donor has to be permanently debarred from the donation, so that otherwise his donor antibodies can create problem in another patient as well. Then minimize the preparation of high plasma volume components from donors known to be leukocyte alloimmunized or who are at increased risk of leukocyte alloimmunization. Means which patients? The patients who are multi-transfused. Because these multi-transfused patients with repeated transfusion produce alloantibodies. Also, multiparous women, more and more pregnancies, they go on producing more and more alloantibodies. And these alloantibodies, donor antibodies, going into the patient may cause this problem. So, high plasma volume components, that means FFPs, SDPs, pooled peptides shouldn't be prepared from those donors. I want to tell you one thing, that in Western countries, FFPs or plasma donations are not taken from a female, pregnant female or post-pregnancy female, post-abortion or post-delivery. These females are debarred from giving the plasma. If they give the plasma, that is used for the fractionation, but not for the transfusion. Their RBCs are used for the transfusion, but not the plasma. In India, it is not possible. But anyway, in our country, still female donations from the female are hardly 2 to 3%. Thirdly, leukoreduced blood components. You will ask why leukoreduced blood components? Because leukoreduced blood components are avoiding leukocytes. And here the problem is because of the donor alloantibodies, not donor leukocytes. But we have seen in some patients, it is exactly opposite mechanism. Very few patients. That time leukocytes are coming from the donor. That means leukocytes means antigens of the leukocytes. Leukocytes antigens are responsible for this. On those cases, they are reacting with the patient antibodies. So here, if you use the leukoreduced blood components, we are avoiding those antigens. So that is one policy we can start with. Wash RBCs. Wash RBCs means we are removing plasma at all. So there won't be any antibodies in that plasma. So wash RBCs. And fresher blood components. As we have seen that in few cases, the biolipids or cytokines released during the storage processes of the blood components, they can create the havoc and trally. So in such situations, we can use fresher blood components. So now to conclude, trally is a life-threatening situation, the diagnosis of which requires high degree of clinical suspicion. Proper treatment support can be life-saving, as though trally is potentially fatal, is self-limiting without permanent damage. Suspicion of trally should be reported to the blood transfusion services so that appropriate action can be taken to identify the implicated donor and to prevent future problems in other patients. Thank you.